Hey everyone, Kris here for Thomann's Guitars and Basses. In today's Master Your Tone episode, we'll check out Thomann's top 3 tube combos. These are the most sold combos and we'll find out if they're any good. These three amps next to me are Thomann's top 3 most sold tube combos, it's a big thing. We're talking about a lot of players choosing these amps, so I wanted to check them out. And now what's interesting is that we have two Marshalls here. The first place is the Harley Tube 15, which is not really a huge surprise to me. The second and third are both Marshall DSL amps. The second place is the DSL 40 and the third place is the DSL 5. We usually try to avoid having multiple products of a certain brand in a video. For obvious reasons, we want to keep some sort of a balance. But this time, it was impossible because except for this Harley, a Vox, and a Fender, like the top 10 is pretty much just Marshalls. It's crazy. So it's a good moment to reflect to that fact. Also, this gives us the opportunity to show what the differences are between two very similar amps. This is the DSL 5, the DSL 40, but different speakers, different cabinet size, different controls, etc. So yeah, let's check that out. And we'll start with the DSL 5. Let's start with a short spec run through and I'll tell you the player's impression as soon as I played all three amps. So the DSL5 is a really compact combo. It has a 10-inch selection speaker and two channels. It has the classic gain and the ultra gain. Those two channels share the EQ and it has a digital reverb. The tubes, it's interesting, it has two 12AX7 preamp tubes and a single really small, like a different kind of power amp tube is the 12BH7 instead of the standard for Marshalls, which would be the EL34. Let's hear it. The second amp is the Marshall DSL 40. It's a much bigger version of the first amp you've just heard. The cabinet is much bigger, the speaker is a 12-inch selection this time, and even though it still has two channels, both channels have two different voicings. So the classic gain has the clean and crunch, the ultra gain has the OD1, OD2. One thing is still the same, the EQ is still shared on both channels. It has some additional controls though, like the presence and resonance. You can turn the loop on and off, you have two masters, and you can turn the reverb up and down per channel. So you have a lot more to tweak with. This is how it sounds. And now let's check out the first place. This is the Harley Tube 15, which I'm not really surprised to see way up like on the first place because of, first of all, obviously its price point. Second of all, it punches way above its weight. It's the kind of 15 water that can be your pedal friendly amp. It takes pedals really well. It can be your simple one channel reverb loaded clean amp, and it can be a really cool classic rock amp if you crank the gain and work the volume to find the right spot for you in the mix. It does a lot, even though it's a very simple amp. It's portable still, but it's not too small. You can actually use it as a backup amp. You can put a mic in front of it and play in stadiums, whatever. It's a very, very versatile yet simple amp, and this is how it sounds like. The player's impressions. Well, let's get the obvious things out of the way. The biggest sound, the most big amp-like sound came from the DSL-40. It's the biggest enclosure, it's the biggest power amp section, and obviously, well, the 12-inch speaker also helps. That's the one that makes you sound like you play, I don't know, a half stack, or it gets the closest to that. The smallest sounding one is the DSL-5. It's the only one here with a 10-inch speaker and obviously the smallest enclosure as well. And it hardly sits right in the middle. Now, that's not necessarily a terrible thing. It depends on what you want to use the amp for. If you want to bring these amps on stage, I would recommend getting place number 2 or number 1, so the DSL-40 or the Harley Tube 15, because those sound still like a combo, but kind of fitting even in like a big room or at higher volumes. The DSL-5 is pretty much unbeatable when we're talking about really quiet, like bedroom level kind of playing, because you don't need that amount of oomph and big low end if you're not very loud. It has a very nice pristine tone, a lot of treble, which is awesome when you play quietly because it just sounds lively. So the DSL-5 is one of those tube amps that can actually sound really pleasing at very low volumes. The Tube 15, the first place, is the most vintage kind of amp. It does have a very nice and rich clean tone that sounds like a combo. It's not like a huge 4x12 kind of clean tone, but it's closer to an American kind of clean tone in a way. And the drive tone, which has quite a lot of overdrive on tap, is the most vintage sounding for sure. That just sounds like a cranked little combo, and you can love that or not. It's just something you need to be aware of. It takes pedals best as well out of these three. And the DSL-40, well, I've mentioned it already, it's the most big amp experience. It's not really a big surprise considering its size, but it also has a higher price compared to the other two. All right, let us know in the comments below if you have any of these amps and you want to share anything about your precious baby. And with all that tone talk aside, what really matters is to enjoy playing the guitar, regardless of the rig and how good it sounds. See you in the next one.